He deleted my work in front of the team. Months of strategy, gone with one click. I smiled. Because what he didn't know, legal had the backup, and I had the key. The fluorescent lights above buzzed like nervous bees, constant, irritating, impossible to ignore. They bathed the office in their sterile glow, bleaching color and warmth from everything, especially the people. I sat frozen in the conference room, hands in my lap, staring at the screen as my boss leaned back in his ergonomic chair, squinting. "Could be better," he muttered, before tapping the delete key with casual cruelty. A gasp didn't come. Neither did a protest. Just silence, the kind that carries humiliation like static on its back. Everyone looked at me, then quickly away, pretending this was normal. Pretending this was fine. It wasn't. 2 months, I had lived inside that file, late nights under flickering desk lamps, coffee so strong it stung, conversations I had transcribed verbatim, research woven with precision into a strategy that could have redefined our quarter. And now, gone, like it never existed, except it did. Because I sent a backup to legal, not just any backup. The full source files, annotated, version-controlled, and time-stamped. I did it automatically, always did. I wasn't naive, not after what happened last year. He thinks this is control, I thought, still staring at the now blank screen. But control comes from what you own, not what you delete. Around the room, our team shifted in their chairs. Mark from Data nervously adjusted his glasses. Helena, who knew better than to make eye contact, kept typing with exaggerated focus. No one said anything. No one ever said anything when Greg decided your work wasn't worth his click. Greg? The boss with a capital B. Chief of chest puffing, micromanaging, and subtly slicing you down with feedback that felt more like a scalpel than support. His office shelf held books like Radical Candor and Good to Great, none of which he'd ever opened, but loved to quote like scripture. "Well," he said, closing the laptop with finality, "let's start from scratch, shall we?" My mouth curved into a smile. Not a big one, just enough. "Of course," I said, folding my hands neatly. "I'll send over a fresh outline." Because what he didn't know, legal had just finished reviewing the source archive, and they'd found something interesting. I was the only one with access to the original document tree. No one else had the credentials. And yes, the audit logs confirmed it. I was the sole creator, the sole source. This wasn't just about credit. It was about authorship, ownership, and more importantly, traceability. The office smelled faintly of burnt coffee and chilled ambition. Greg stood, already halfway out the door, mumbling something about a lunch with upper execs. The moment he was gone, I turned to Mark. "Hey," I said, voice even, "could you check if the legal team responded?" Mark blinked. Yeah, actually. They asked for a quick meeting about the IP chain of custody." I nodded. "Perfect. Loop me in." Because if Greg wanted to start from scratch, he'd have to do it without my mind, without the source, without the one thing he didn't know I had already protected. The legal floor always felt colder. Not just the temperature, but the vibe. Fewer smiles, more precision. Where our department buzzed with shifting deadlines and ego contests over lunch preferences, legal ran on silence and protocol. And today, that silence cracked the moment I walked in. Sasha, the IP specialist, glanced up from her desk as I entered the glass-walled meeting room. "You're early," she said, closing a file with a soft thud. "I came prepared," I replied, sliding into the seat across from her. She tilted her head. "We reviewed the document trail you sent. Everything checks out. Source metadata, edits, creation logs. It's clean. Yours, from day one, I nodded. Of course it was, but hearing it confirmed in legalese felt different, heavier, official. Why now? She asked, folding her hands. You've sent backups before, but never flagged them. I hesitated, then, because this time, he tried to erase it in front of everyone. No feedback, no reason, just could be better, and delete. Sasha didn't flinch. And he didn't know legal had a copy. He doesn't know a lot of things. I pulled out my phone and placed it gently on the table. Check the timestamp on the submission. The version he deleted wasn't even the latest. She looked, then raised an eyebrow. You submitted a copy to legal before the meeting? I smiled. Before he even scheduled it. She gave a low, almost impressed chuckle. You've been here too long. Long enough to know where the fire exits are, including the digital ones. She tapped her pen on the table. We'll escalate this, not as a grievance, as an IP control violation. If he reused your material or tried to repurpose it post-deletion without attribution, it won't go well. He didn't. He doesn't have access anymore. I revoked it after his little show. That stopped her. You revoked executive access. I restricted access to critical source files, as per the SOP, unreviewed deletions trigger rollback protocol. It's in the documentation. Sasha stared at me, then reached for her phone. Stay here, she said, standing. I watched as she left the room, not hurried, not slow, intentional. The moment the door clicked shut, I exhaled. My hands were steady, but adrenaline prickled at my neck. This wasn't just about a deleted file anymore. It was about precedent. If Greg could get away with erasing authorship once, he'd do it again. To me, to others. But if legal stepped in now, the next click of his delete key would cost him more than pride. Sasha returned with another woman in tow, someone I didn't know. This is Mariella, she said. IP counsel for external review. Mariella extended a hand. Cool, firm grip, eyes sharp. We need to talk about chain of custody and the potential breach of internal compliance. A breach? That changed the stakes. I leaned in. What kind of breach? Mariella opened her folder. Greg's deletion triggered a conflict with internal retention policy. We've flagged multiple similar incidents over the past year. Yours is the first one with irrefutable audit support. I blinked. You mean... Yes, she said. You might have just handed us what we need. The room held its breath, and so did I, because now this wasn't just about survival. It was about the structure underneath Greg, and how easily it might crack. Sometimes the quiet ones hold the loudest proof, and sometimes the smallest audit trail is a fuse waiting to be lit. Want to see how quiet power rewrites office politics? Tap that follow. The next chapter goes deeper into what Greg didn't see coming. Greg's office door had a particular sound when it closed. Not a slam, never that obvious, but a soft, calculated click. It echoed more than it should have, like a punctuation mark after something that shouldn't be ignored. I sat across from him now, just the two of us, in the aftermath of legal's preliminary inquiry, as he called it, voice tight, controlled. The man who had deleted my work while holding eye contact now wouldn't quite meet my gaze. You didn't have to escalate, he began, flipping a pen between his fingers. I tilted my head. I didn't escalate. Legal reviewed a standard backup. They had questions. I answered them. That pause, half a beat too long. Greg wasn't used to being reminded of the rules. He was used to bending them just enough to seem powerful, just enough to get his way without ever outright breaking them. You revoked my access, he said, pen still spinning. It's automatic, I replied. When source files are deleted without review, The rollback protocol restricts access pending legal clearance. SOP. He nodded slowly, lips thinning. But you submitted it to legal before the meeting. I smiled. Also, SOP. I always submit before presenting. Version control. You taught me that, remember? Another silence, heavier now. Greg leaned forward, elbows on the desk. You've always been sharp, strategic. That's why I brought you into the Q4 architecture team. But this doesn't look good on either of us. I didn't answer. Let him fill the silence. You know how these things go, he continued. People hear legal review, and suddenly there's blood in the water. It would be better for both of us to move past this. I raised an eyebrow. Move past what? He blinked. The misunderstanding. There it was. That word again. The corporate whiteout for misconduct. Misunderstanding. A flicker of heat rose in my chest, but I kept my tone even. Just for clarity, are you saying my documented authorship, the deletion during a team review, and the restricted access logs are all a misunderstanding? He paused again, longer, then leaned back, folding his arms. No, I'm saying it's fixable. That was when I knew. He wasn't apologizing. He was calculating, trying to pull the steering wheel back before the car fully veered off-road. I stood. I appreciate your concern, Greg, but I didn't break anything. I followed process. I walked to the door, pausing just long enough. And, from what legal's suggesting, it's not me they'll be following up with. I left the room to the soft hum of the HVAC and the even softer silence of a man finally realizing he couldn't hit delete on consequences. Down the hall, Sasha was waiting. HR wants a statement, she said quietly. You'll be called in? I nodded. I'll have it ready by end of day, with documentation. Her smile was subtle. Thought you might. By 4 p.m., I had crafted the cleanest, most surgical HR statement of my career. No embellishments, no emotion, just timestamps, access logs, and policy references, all neatly numbered in an appendix. The kind of statement that didn't scream retaliation. It simply whispered, I know how the system works better than you do. I submitted it through the HR portal, attaching every document legal had cleared. As the upload bar crawled across the screen, I felt a calm unlike anything I'd known during my time under Greg's management. Not adrenaline, not relief, something quieter, deeper, control. But HR doesn't work in silence, not for long. An hour later, the ping came. Interview confirmed, room 5B, 10:30 a.m. tomorrow. I closed my laptop gently. The office had thinned out. The usual Thursday exodus of people pretending to stay late, but slipping out once the Slack threads cooled. Mark passed my desk on his way out. You okay? I nodded. Just finishing some documentation. He gave me a knowing look. Everyone's talking about it, you know. You, Greg, legal. People are watching. That wasn't a threat. It was context. Because in offices like ours, power didn't shift in memos. It shifted in whispers. And the whispers were getting louder. The next morning, room 5B was too brightly lit. HR had 2 reps present, one asking questions, the other typing silently like a court recorder. They weren't warm, they weren't cold. They were neutral in that HR kind of way that makes you feel both protected and dissected. We've reviewed your documentation, the lead said, and we're investigating whether executive actions violated company policy regarding authorship rights and digital IP. I simply nodded. They weren't asking for emotion, just truth. They continued, Can you confirm you were not notified before the deletion of your files? Yes, he said. Could be better, and hit delete during the meeting. I have witnesses. And can you confirm you had filed a versioned copy with legal ahead of the meeting? Yes. I submitted it via Secure Protocol 3.1, same I've used for every major review since onboarding. The typist didn't look up once. The HR rep folded her hands. Thank you. That will be all for now. As I stood to leave, she added, almost as an afterthought, you may want to avoid direct interaction with Greg until this concludes. Avoiding Greg wouldn't be the hard part. The hard part would be waiting. But sometimes silence is where the loudest consequences grow. And mine? They were taking root. Greg was unraveling, not all at once, but in strands. At first, it was subtle. Missed check-ins, shorter meetings, an unusual quiet on Slack. His daily motivational morning emails stopped arriving, the ones that always opened with a quote he Googled 5 minutes before sending. Then came the calendar purge. Meetings canceled without reason. Leadership stand-ups postponed indefinitely. The office noticed, whispers at the espresso machine, raised eyebrows over shared screens. One particularly bold junior analyst said, "Is he okay?" Loud enough that even the walls blushed. I stayed silent, not out of fear, out of calculation. Because when someone's losing control, you don't interrupt. You just make sure you're watching when it happens. That afternoon, Sasha pinged me. Need to talk. HR follow-up. Bring your original version files and the metadata export. I met her in legal's secured room, the one with frosted glass and no visible door handle from the outside. A space designed for trust and secrecy, the kind of room that knew too many endings. She looked up as I entered. They want to see the full authorship chain. I figured they would. I handed over the flash drive, encrypted and labeled. Mariella joined us moments later, her heels clicking like punctuation. HR is officially expanding the scope. Greg's actions weren't isolated. We found other deletions, 3 in the last 6 months. All undocumented, all done during live reviews. I blinked. Was anyone else backing up their work? She shook her head. Not like you. Yours is the only complete submission with timestamps, backup receipts, and access logs. Suddenly, I wasn't just a witness, I was a reference case. The ethics team is looping in, Mariella added, and I need you to be ready in case this escalates to a formal hearing. I paused. You mean a disciplinary review? She nodded. Or worse. The phrase hung in the air like humidity. When I left legal, the hallway felt longer, quieter. People moved out of my way, not out of fear, but respect, noticed now, respected now. By the time I reached my desk, a new email waited. From HR Compliance. Subject, Executive Access Suspension. Body, per current investigation protocol, Greg Haller's access to internal documentation systems has been suspended pending outcome. I stared at the screen. It wasn't final, it wasn't loud, but it was a fracture in the wall, and fractures grow. Greg didn't show up the next morning. No Slack status, no out sick email, no passive-aggressive comment about resilience in the group chat. Just nothing. His chair remained pushed in, his desk meticulously undisturbed, like a museum exhibit labeled, "Here once sat power pretending to be leadership." At 10:15 a.m., the CEO walked through our floor. Not a quick pass, a full walkthrough, eyes scanning, steps deliberate. He rarely came down here. Greg usually acted as the buffer, the gatekeeper. Today, there was no one to intercept. The air shifted. By noon, a formal announcement landed in our inboxes. Subject: Temporary Departmental Oversight Update. As of today, departmental oversight for strategic operations will be handled jointly by HR and legal pending internal review outcomes. Please direct all approvals through chain outlined in the attached protocol. I read it twice. No name mentioned, no accusations, just procedural elegance masking a quiet decapitation. Mark wheeled his chair over. This real? I nodded. It's happening. He glanced around, then leaned in. You think he's coming back? I paused, then said softly, not in the same chair. Later that day, Sasha messaged me again. CEO asked for your audit log. Not legal, him personally. That alone was a sentence you frame and hang on the wall. I sent it over, carefully scrubbed and labeled, with a brief summary that read like a neutral observer's journal. No emotion, just data. 10 minutes later, the CEO replied directly, "Thank you. Useful. Quiet professionalism matters. We notice." That second line was what hit hardest. We notice. Because in an office like ours, visibility wasn't about noise. It was about patterns, and mine had finally become too consistent to ignore. At 6:04 p.m., as I packed my bag, a new meeting invite appeared. Strategy refresh, executive input requested. From the CEO's assistant, I was one of 5 people on the list. I stared at the screen, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and knowing. Not a promotion, not a reward, but an invitation into the room where real power whispers. Greg had tried to delete me. Now the door he guarded opened. Room 18. S. A was colder than the rest of the building, not just in temperature but tone. The windows were tinted, the furniture expensive in that understated don't ask the price kind of way. I recognized 2 people at the long table, the CFO and Maya from Strategic Ops, known for her terrifying calm during investor calls. And then there was me. No name placard, no agenda sent ahead of time, just executive input requested. I sat down with my notebook and a pen that clicked too loudly in my hand. The CEO entered without ceremony. He didn't smile, just nodded once and got straight to it. We're conducting a full audit of internal strategic workflows, specifically authorship, data flow, and decision traceability. He looked directly at me. You were the only contributor on the Q4 blueprint. Legal confirmed. I met his gaze, steady. Correct. I authored, submitted, and backed it up per protocol. He nodded again, then opened a slim folder. Greg presented a variant of that blueprint to an external partner. 3 days after deletion, slightly modified, but fundamentally, your structure. A pause, a beat, a shift in the room. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Maya leaned forward. Do we know if this was systemic? The CEO answered. We're investigating. So far, this is the only documented case where proper version control caught it early. He closed the folder with a quiet snap. And the only reason we caught it was because she followed protocol. Silence again, but not the uncomfortable kind. This one buzzed with tension, with realization, with the slow turning of gears. The CFO finally spoke. She should be looped into the redesign of the strategic flow. If this is the new standard we want, we follow it. And her. Maya nodded. Agreed. Quiet compliance is the strongest armor in a room full of noise. I sat still, letting them talk around me, not as an outsider, but as a reference. Later, walking back to my floor, I passed the glass hallway that overlooked the city. From here, the buildings looked like data points, organized, predictable. But I knew better. Behind every sharp angle, there was a story someone tried to bury. Greg's was still unraveling. But mine was being written in the open now. When I reached my desk, another message waited. From Executive Operations. Subject, Strategic Source File Archive. Access upgrade. You are now listed as primary reviewer on all new strategic submissions. That meant oversight. That meant authorship gatekeeping. That meant I was now the backup. By Friday, the office moved like a hive that had finally noticed the queen was gone. Greg's name hadn't been uttered since the departmental oversight email. Not by HR, not by team leads, not even in whispered Slack messages. His absence had become part of the decor, like the unused standing desk he insisted on installing for posture, now gathering dust and awkward glances. I arrived to find a sealed envelope on my desk. No label, no sender, just my name written in precise, tight strokes. Inside, a printed memo, to whom it may concern, effective immediately. All deleted or overwritten strategy-related files must be automatically archived and mirrored to a legal accessible vault. Authorship metadata must remain visible across edits. Signed, Executive Council. No announcement, no fanfare, just policy. Rewritten in my reflection. I turned the paper over, handwritten at the bottom in red ink. This never should have required a precedent. Thank you for making one. No signature, but I knew the penmanship. The CEO wrote like someone who carved ideas instead of writing them. Mark rolled by with his usual coffee and mischief. So, are we pretending you didn't just become a corporate ghost story? I gave him a sideways look. Ghosts haunt, I document. He grinned. Same thing around here. An alert blinked on my screen. Incoming submission. Strategy draft. Q1 2027. Source review requested. Attached, an outline from Maya. In the comments, trusting your eyes on this before I move it upstream. I opened the doc, well-structured, clean logic, but one sentence stood out. In light of recent events, transparency will define our future, not just our processes, but our people. She'd embedded it like a signal, not loud, just present. By noon, I'd completed the review, added my notes, and approved the flow. When I hit submit, I realized something. I hadn't thought about Greg all day. Not out of indifference, but irrelevance, because the story no longer belonged to him. It belonged to everyone who watched, everyone who whispered, everyone who learned that protocol wasn't boring. It was powerful. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one keeping copies anymore. The next leadership forum came with catered pastries and carefully filtered coffee, but the sugar couldn't hide the tension. These monthly gatherings used to be Greg's stage, where he'd commandeer the room with jokes that masked warnings, slides that buried data behind buzzwords, and compliments that always ended with "but." This time, his name didn't even appear on the invite. Instead, the agenda opened with Session 1, Protocol as Protection, How Documentation Prevents Organizational Risk, presented by your name. My breath caught for a moment when I read it. Not fear, not pride, just gravity. The lights dimmed, the projector hummed, and suddenly it was my voice filling the room. 40 executives, 0 Greg. I want to talk about failure, I began. Not individual failure, structural failure, the kind that grows in silence, in undocumented edits, in unlogged deletions, and how we stop pretending oversight only matters after things go wrong. The room went still, not out of discomfort, out of realization. We talk about innovation like it's magic, but innovation without traceability is risk, and risk, when ignored, becomes liability. Slide by slide, I laid it bare. Not the drama, not the politics, just the mechanics, the way processes had quietly protected the company from a PR disaster, the way one backup file prevented an IP scandal. The final slide, protocols aren't bureaucracy, they're armor. Silence, then applause. Not thunderous, but real. Afterward, the CEO approached. "You've redefined what accountability looks like," he said, not smiling, but his eyes softer now. "I'd like to keep you involved, quietly." I nodded. That's the only way I know how. As people filed out, Maya walked by and murmured, "Ghost stories going full gospel now." I laughed. Let's just make sure no one forgets the footnotes. Later that evening, back at my desk, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I opened the folder named Personal Drafts. Inside, an old outline, a strategy Greg once scoffed at. I began rewriting it, slowly, under a new title. Version 0, Before They Noticed. Because this time, it wouldn't get deleted. This time, it started with my name. And stayed that way. 3 months later, the office looked the same. Open layout, humming monitors, color-coded dashboards. But the energy had changed. People spoke with more certainty. They saved their work with diligence. Meetings had agendas again. And somewhere between Greg's quiet exit and the new audit trail protocols, a strange thing happened. Respect replaced fear. I wasn't promoted. I wasn't rewarded. What I got was quieter, heavier, more permanent. I became the person people came to before sharing big ideas. The one asked to just take a look before anything went upstream. Not loud, not decorated, just trusted. At the end of a long Tuesday, Sasha passed my desk. "You know," she said, leaning on the edge, "we've seen a 70% drop in undocumented edits since January." I nodded. Good. And there's talk about folding those new compliance workflows into onboarding, standard practice. Also good. She hesitated. Does it feel like enough? I looked around. A junior dev was nervously showing their prototype to a director. Someone else was casually asking legal about citation formats before submitting. And in the background, no Greg. No fear of deletion. Just the soft rhythm of people trying to do better. "Yeah," I said finally. "It feels like enough." Microcliff. As she turned to go, Sasha paused. "You're not going to stay here forever, are you?" I smiled. "Probably not, but I'll leave it cleaner than I found it." That night, I closed my laptop and backed everything up. Not because I was afraid, but because it's what I do. Some people leave legacies with titles and plaques. I left mine with version histories,